So, as I've been experimenting with my full spectrum camera, the Nikon D50, I stumbled into this really unusual filter on AliExpress, and it was cheap. I think I paid $12 for it. I've seen it on sale for cheaper, and there's a little shipping on top of it. But the idea of this filter is that it'll pass a whole bunch of ultraviolet light. And apparently that would go into my blue channel on my camera, so I should be able to get a really blue sky, was the hope. And then it also, over here on the right, gives you a bunch of infrared light. And here in the middle, the part that's down at 0 was all the visible light, so it's blocking all the visible light, supposedly. There's a little comes through. So I'll show you a little chart on that. So I found this little graphic online, and as you can see here, between 400 nanometers and 700 nanometers is where your visible light's supposed to be. So that filter is supposed to be passing a whole bunch of ultraviolet and just a tiny little bit of violet, I guess, down here, which would land in my blue channel. Which figures, since I've got red, green, and blue pixels for the camera, this area over here should land in the blue, and then somewhere here in the middle it's in the green channel, and then over in the red. So it's blocking out almost all the visible, and then it's passing infrared. Now, when I took it out and tried it the first time, what I found was it lets through all kinds of infrared light. So everything looked red, and at first I thought, well, I'm not sure if this is going to work the way I want it. And of course I wasn't real sure what this thing was really designed for. Because when I read the description of it later, it talks about using an ultraviolet light. And but you can use it outdoors as well, because on a bright sunny day you get a high UV index. So I did get it to go, but what I found out was I had to increase my exposure quite a bit to get the ultraviolet in. And I was watching a video some guy made about a filter just like this, and he did not like the filter at all. He said it's basically just an infrared filter that happens to leak through some ultraviolet, apparently. And in a way, that's true. But what he was talking about was, out of all the light that's coming in from the sun, most of it is actually infrared light. We just can't see it. And as far as what's ultraviolet, there's a smaller percentage, like 10% or 20%. I forget the exact numbers. I think it might have been 10% ultraviolet and say 40% visible and 50% infrared, if I remember those right. And if you block this out, all your visible light, that means that filter's passing in like 5 times as much infrared as it does ultraviolet. And when you're dealing with a narrow type filter, you have to increase the exposure. So I ended up doing a test. I just pointed the camera at the same spot. I had it set on ISO 400 at f8 with a 20mm wide angle lens that I usually use for my infrared stuff. And I took a series of pictures, and I went 1,000th of a second, and then I kept going one f-stop at a time. So then I did a 500th, and then a 250th, and then a 125th, and then a 60th, and then the last one was a 30th of a second. And I'll show you what they look like. And it's actually, surprisingly, every one of those pictures is usable, just if you play with your channels. And real quick, like before I forget, this is a picture of me holding the filter in front of a light bulb shining through. So you can actually see through it. With a typical infrared filter, like a 720 filter, I could barely see through it. With a 950 nanometer filter, I couldn't see anything. It's like a lens cap. But one thing that was neat about this, when I went outside in bright sunny light, if I kind of cupped my hands around my eyes when I was trying to look through the camera, I could actually see through there and frame up my picture. So here's what it looks like before you do anything at 1,000th of a second, which doesn't look too exciting when you first look at it. But I realized I can work with it. If you come over here on the right and view the channels, you can see the red channel. It's almost white. That's really overexposed. The green's kind of dark, which it should be because that's supposed to be blocked, and the blue's got some light. So if I turn off the red eyeball, for viewing only, it shows, hey, there is some ultraviolet light coming through there in the blue channel. And then I can play with my channel mixer. I'll do that here in a second, because once I convert the image, here's just viewing only, turning that off. So we'll go up here to colors and down to components, channel mixer. And what I'm going to do is up here in the red channel, remove the red. So I'll just do this kind of quick, like I'm just dragging it down to about 0 there. So we're turning off the red. And you've got some blue. Now, so it looks really blue, and I'm not sure how well it shows on the video, but it seems like everything's blue. But I figured out I could increase the green. The one video I was telling you about I watched, the guy said that the green channel ends up being kind of a luminosity channel, which is kind of a black and white look to it. So I'm cranking this up quite a bit. So I drag that all the way over. I'll hit so then I'll hit OK. And then I'll do it again. I'm going to bring the green up some more. Trying to remember what I did before when I played with this. So over here in the green, I'm bringing it up, and it starts to kind of brighten up everything, and it's not just all blue. And then I can play with, these are kind of like little experimental things. I'll go with my saturation, and if I bring that down some, I can make it almost, I can go all the way over and make it black and white if I want, or if I want to leave a little color in it, I can try to make it have just a slight bit of blue, kind of just go with whatever you like. But you notice you do get some blue sky out of it. And here the clouds show up, almost looks like a painting or something. Then I'll show you the one in the middle, which would be like 2/50th of a second, because it'll have a little different effect. Now when I go to 250th of a second, the red looks even more burnt out. I'll just turn off the eyeball for a second. And then we'll go back to the channel mixer here. But as you move down, you start getting more and more blue in this. With the long exposure, you actually have to get rid of the red channel. So you could play with your exposure and get an infrared exposure with this thing. And you could kind of go in the middle and try to get a little bit of infrared and a little bit of ultraviolet. If I bring up the exposure a little. Actually, that kind of brightens things up a little. It gives you kind of an unusual blue sky. You can actually, if you leave a little red in there, it'll start to turn purple. But you can just kind of experiment with it. And while I'm thinking about it, this white down here on the ground is not snow. That is grass that's starting to turn green. I took this picture in the middle of March, and we were starting to get some warmer weather, so the grass was turning green. The trees are mostly bare. There's a few little twigs coming out on some of them, you know, little sprouts of leaves. But basically, not much anything. And I did have to play with my focus. I'm using a manual focus lens. So before, I was just putting it on the red dot where the infrared is supposed to be. And that was pretty good for way out in the distance. But I've got some tree branches here, and I also took a picture with trees in the foreground where you could really see them, where you could see the trunks. And they were out of focus, so I moved the focus so it was farther away from infinity. I was focusing a little closer to maybe 20 feet away or whatever. And, you know, it was just kind of an experiment, and I'd take pictures until I got what I liked. And then I could start to get these branches and things in the foreground to come into play. And then I'm going to go all the way to the 30th of a second one here next. And then with this one here, you can't put any of the red in it. Okay, so here's the one at a 30th of a second. And here, as you can see, if you look over here, the red channel looks like it's almost solid white. And fine, let's just see what happens if we move the saturation over like we were going with black and white. Get it to drag over. Very gray looking at that point. I could probably bring up my black. Let's go to exposure. I'll drag up my black level. Not sure if it'll let me. This one here, I'll actually have to get rid of the red completely. So as you can see, I just kind of experiment with them. I notice it has kind of a yellowish look. But if we turn off the red eyeball, it's very blue, very white, kind of overexposed, so I can play with that. So I'll go with the channel mixer here. Go down here, channel mixer. And I'm going to just get rid of all that red. And let's see, what if I... Blue seems like it likes to be there. Let's bring up the green. It gets pretty hot. So I'm dragging the green down, and it's less overexposed. So it's like the ultraviolet part wasn't all that overexposed. When I look at my channels over here, you can see the red, of course, is burnt out. The green might be slightly darker than the blue channel. But, of course, now it looks, it's got a nice blue sky, and you can find some detail. And the trees here are kind of heavy looking. see here if I drop the exposure a little. Yeah, if I play with this, I probably need to be kind of gentle with it. I'm just grabbing it real quick, like, so I can use the click stop over here and go little by little. And then again, of course, I can play with the saturation if I think it's a little too blue. If I decide that, because what'll happen, I notice, if I get a real good look at it, sometimes it's like everything just seems like it has a blue cast. So I toned that down. So I haven't exactly figured out all the exposure stuff of what's really good for it, but I found I can definitely get some interesting pictures with this thing. And for me, all this infrared stuff is kind of experimental anyway. And I can just, get a different effect each time. Of course, this day here, it was a couple hours before sunset, and the sun was behind my back, and it might have kind of peeked in and out behind clouds a little bit from one exposure to another, but I took all these pictures within a minute or two of each other. I just, real quick, like, took a picture, changed the shutter speed. Anyway, obviously this filter isn't for everybody. If you want something that's real specific, you might hate this filter, but I found it's, say, very inexpensive, and I'm finding it to be quite interesting. I had fun with it once I figured out I could, when I did that exposure test, I was surprised that every single exposure I could get some kind of a usable image, because if 1,000th of a second was supposedly correct, then 1/30th of a second is like 5 f-stops overexposed. So I could take a picture and say, well, I want the infrared side, or I could say I want the ultraviolet side, or I could try to get a mixture of both. When I get playing with it, bringing up the green in some of them, it'll make, like in this case here, I don't know how good it shows, but this area here, it kind of looks black and white, and that's blue sky. And the trees, of course, look kind of black and white, but that's really all they are. Right at the minute, they're just bare branches. But anyway, I just wanted to share this up with you, to if anybody's interested in this kind of filter, if you've seen them out there online for cheap. You can kind of have some fun with it, and hopefully you found this interesting.